Apart from the splendour of its frame, this 16th century portrait of a young woman has no identifiable setting, and we don't even know who she is. From her headdress and clothing, she's wealthy, or made to seem so. The artist may have been more interested in what she wears than in her, which begins to tell us something about the artist. He liked to show off. This turban, if you can call it that, pushed to the back of the head, the hair pinned beneath it severely, not flatteringly, she's no great beauty. But the turban, shimmering with gold, that's what catches the eye. Hundreds of tiny points of light arrayed in bands like pearls, and the background dark, except for a fragment of greenish curtain lifted, just enough to suggest the room where she sits. But now cut out the turban, we can actually see her for what she is. An appealing, intelligent face. Sharp eyes, strong nose, a mouth that looks ready to smile, a questioning air. What is the artist making of me? Well, the answer is he's making an awful lot out of her clothing. The white neckband, the subtle colour of her dress, and those flamboyant curls and puffs below her shoulders, all picked out in strong light. The dress, the hair, the turban-like hat, clearly she's a woman of high fashion. And if we lived at that time, we'd know what circles she moved in. What's also clear is that the artist has all the skills of a fashionable portrait painter. He knows when to be precise and when to be flashy, when drawing should be exact, and when elegant brushstrokes should take over. On those puffs of material, the colour is almost liquid, all subtlety of tones. But on the turban, as sharp as jewels, a deliberate contrast of technique. And on the face itself, different again, careful, smooth, the brushwork hardly visible. No showmanship here, though the face is skillfully modelled by areas of light and deep shadow. That slight hollowing of the temple and cheek, adding character to the somewhat ordinary face of this woman, whoever she was, we don't know. But the painter we do know, Francesco Mazzola, more familiar as Parmigianino, the name deriving from the Italian city of Parma, where he was born in 1503 and where he died in 1540 at the age of 37. In art history, Parmigianino belongs to that group of Italian painters we've come to call Mannerist, from maniera, meaning style. To the Mannerists, style was uppermost, often embracing artificial effects, exaggerated gestures. Not much sign of those here, but a self-portrait of his, aged 20, reveals something of that preoccupation with the disquieting aspects of the human psyche, an inquiring and troubled self-love. We know how this particular self-portrait came about from his biographer Giorgio Vasari in his Lives of the Great Italian Painters. Vasari is not always reliable, sometimes waiving the truth for a good story. But in this case, the story is borne out by the evidence of the picture itself. Parmigianino, writes Vasari, decided to paint a portrait of himself as an exercise in exploring the finer points of the art of painting. The urge to do so came from looking at his own face in a convex mirror of the kind used by barbers. He noticed the distorting effects caused by the curved glass on the beams of the room and the ceiling. They appeared bent. Other parts of the room receded in a most strange way. He decided to copy these effects. So he had a piece of wood made exactly the same size as the mirror, and with great skill began to set down precisely what he saw reflected in the glass. And since everything close to a convex mirror is magnified, while things further away become smaller, he painted his own hand very large. And, as Vasari, so beautifully it was almost real. Francesco was beautiful, Vasari goes on, with fine features closer to those of an angel than of a man. And it was this which gave his portrait a hint of the divine. Vasari's enthusiasm for this self-admiring portrait conceals a certain bias. He himself was a true Florentine. He loved the High Renaissance. And what he emphasizes is the realism and angelic beauty of the portrait, as though Parmigianino was another Raphael. What Vasari didn't see, or chose not to see, was the way Parmigianino was already breaking from those Renaissance ideals of realism, with their rules of perfect balance and proportion. Realism, for Parmigianino, was something else. We see the difference immediately if we look at Dürer, another self-portrait, but from a generation earlier, painted in 1500. Here is Dürer gazing at himself without any disquieting tricks of style. Everything about the face obeys laws of geometrical symmetry. The Renaissance fascination for mathematics taken from ancient Greece is seen to relate to man himself. Beauty equals proportion. Even the vanity of the Christ-like pose is acceptable in the context of the Renaissance ideal, man created in the image of God. Now, how different is the way Parmigianino looks at himself. The head slightly to one side, partly in shadow, the gaze no longer forceful but introspective. No search for an ideal beauty, only for what is individual about a face. Quite another kind of vanity. The artist poses the question, what is special about me? We're invited to speculate, what sort of man is it who wears this face? What's going on inside? And now look once more at the young lady. Here are prominent shadows again, and the invitation to inquire what sort of person she is. So there are two things about the artist: introspective inquiry and the importance of style. Style like the tricks of a conjurer. The manner of painting always holds the key. Maniera, style. How an artist paints is integral to what he paints. All of which makes Parmigianino a surprisingly modern artist. These are attitudes with which Delacroix or Manet would have concurred. At the same time, this remains a traditional portrait. It would not have been acceptable otherwise. Looking at the whole picture, you can see the artist's need to make a traditional portrait interesting, something personal to himself as well as personal to the sitter. Style and the personality of the subject are kept curiously separate, which they not always were. His contemporary Lorenzo Lotto, for example, made everything stress the intense presence of this young man, whose portrait hangs nearby in the Vienna Kunsthistorische Museum. Where Lotto captures a particular moment, Parmigianino's young lady may not change very much in the artist's eyes a moment later or a year later, though his style may change. How close we are in 16th century Italy to the 19th century notion of art for art's sake.